But the new thing here, those first two deleted scenes with Davos and this character Fergus, those are linked. And it turns out, not from this, but I had to go look this up, they're actually the remaining fragments of yet another abandoned subplot. That I searched this, and it turns out the actor who played Fergus later explained what happened in a Reddit post. Basically, Fergus isn't a soldier. He's just a commoner, as refugees are pouring into Winterfell, and they arm anyone strong enough to lift a weapon. And we saw a bit of that with him specifically, when they're giving out soup, saying he doesn't want to hide in the crypts but stay and fight on the ramparts, just one line. Well, as the actor explained it, the character was going to have a whole mini subplot of sorts. That he said in this Reddit post that he was supposed to have a big death scene during the battle, actually, where he's on the ramparts shooting a bow, that he comes back in the battle episode, he's shooting a bow, and being encouraged to fight the whole time by Arya and Davos. And after fighting bravely for a while, he would have been dragged down over the castle wall by whites and fallen to his death. But it was cut from the show due to what are called scheduling issues, which I think means it was never filmed. Probably the way they describe it. That's all the new information. Let me break this down a bit. I hope you're starting to see the pattern here, which this is just yet another example of. The Long Night Battle episode was a sloppy mess. Even though they honestly believed for months leading up to Season 8 that it was going to be some kind of triumph of television. Benioff and Weiss are idiots with no production experience, and they wanted this on a truly unfilmable scale. They ran overtime, then just edited together what they had. This was entirely their fault. It was not unavoidable. It was due to poor planning and habitually ignoring their production staff. This isn't the first time we've specifically seen this. This has been a huge recurring problem since Season 5, with cramming in all the Dorne stuff as they were filming. Let's make another 40-minute subplot. Michelle Clapton probably left the show over that. Or the Battle of the Bastards stuff with the horses, that there physically isn't time to do this. This is not an isolated incident. This is the fourth year of this being a huge problem since Season 5, but in many ways it was going on since the pilot, that they really were stumbling around and didn't know what they were doing. And like Kim Renfro recently put out her book, which has a lot of new material she put together on the filming of the pilot, which we knew of through disparate sources before, but she put together into one cohesive book pretty well for newcomers to this. And she said the biggest shock was that, how did I never hear of this before? When these were all public interviews, she didn't have to interview people. It's just things we knew of from, oh yeah, you remember that interview here or there, because we were, all of us online were reading them as they happened. She sorted them into a chapter, but we knew of all this stuff publicly. And she's just, how is no one reporting on this? Well, people like getting interviews with Benioff and Weiss. They're not going to badmouth them. All the craziness. So, particularly from Season 5 onwards, that's why we kept getting not even storylines I dislike, but things that are internally incoherent. That we kept getting what I call relic scenes. We kept getting relic scenes from abandoned storylines, and we kept trying to make sense of them, or, this was some ingenious fake-out. It wasn't a fake-out. It's a few surviving scenes from a storyline that was abandoned, that they just sort of edited back in as best they could, and thought we'd forget about stuff. Like, when they cut out Cersei was going to have a miscarriage at the end of Season 7, then they rewrote her storyline. Well, that's more of a relic plot point of, they were leading up to that, there were hints of that, and then when they moved away from it, all that foreshadowing she would have a miscarriage or whatever was wasted, even though we know they were going to do that. Actors said they were going to do that, but other things like the Arya chase through Braavos which had a lot of weird plot elements in it. I'm not sure exactly which. I'm not sure if, oh, she was really a faceless man or not. It's just you edited together what you had. And that's why parts of it don't seem to make sense. That we tried all together in a coherent whole when it's almost like a story round where you take turns telling something, that parts are going to be missing because the next person in the story round doesn't know what the first person intended the ending to be. Just when you get relic scenes like that from half-abandoned storylines. In my main video on the deleted script scenes, I already yelled for quite a bit about the impact of cutting out secondary characters, such as Alice Karstark. Please watch the whole video. I yelled just about Alice for like 20 minutes. But the short version is that as the later TV seasons went on, it felt like the fully realized world of Westeros ceased to exist. And everything was happening to just the main starring cast members. Just those core 7. And this happened to the point it affected the plot and affected the audience's willing suspension of disbelief that wouldn't there be repercussions to this beyond these 7 people? That other people would be mad at them for something. That this is a lived-in world where there are hundreds of major lords in all of Westeros. And suddenly they just become plot holes they're willing to live with. Because only the core 7 cast members matter. I mean, what I mean is, like, shouldn't there have been repercussions for Cersei blowing up the Great Sept? Blowing up their Vatican? That this is a continent-wide religious organization. That what do priests in the rest of Westeros think of that? Or even pious lords in other regions. Shouldn't, like, really religious lords in the Reach or even the Westerlands be angry at them for that? Or, and I spend another 40 minutes yelling about this in the other video, they actually tried to push the idea that Daenerys feels isolated in Westeros because Jon Snow and Sansa don't like her, when there should really be dozens of major lords in each of the 7 kingdoms interacting with her, from the Reach, from Dorne, from the Iron Islands, all of which are declared for her, to the point it's impossible for her to feel isolated. I don't know what the books are doing. I actually think they're doing nothing like this, but for example, I'd allow something like Jon Snow rejects her, and hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. She goes mad with grief over being rejected like that. That's internally consistent as a statement. But trying to elevate, reaching beyond that to not just she's scorned, so she gets wrathful, but she feels isolated and therefore wrathful. How did you try to push that she's isolated when lords have dozens of retainers and officers? That just doesn't happen. In the same episode, we're hearing that, like, Dorne and the Iron Islands are on her side. That logically there should be other people around who are talking to them. Well, it's all interrelated. I mean, I talked about how losing the Alice Karstark scenes wasn't just deleting a good subplot tying in continuity with past seasons, which it would have been. The Karstarks had sort of a story arc. It also made the world feel less expansive, less lived in, and ultimately shorting the plot. And I already talked about how it wasn't even secondary characters like major lords like the Karstarks. Sansa and even Tyrion himself had an action sequence filmed, but they cut out most of their scenes from the battle episode. And I mentioned Jaime and Brienne as well. If they had more scenes at some point, they weren't in the final script. That even within the 7 core starring cast members, by process of elimination, try to describe who did what. Most of them didn't get much to do. It was a giant Arya fest. I'm serious. Discuss this in the comments. Just in terms of raw screen time when the camera was pointed at a Maisie Williams scene, how much of there was devoted to Arya as opposed to Jaime or Brienne? For God's sake, they dropped the horror scenes of Sansa and Tyrion fighting whites in the crypts, and it seems like they directly replaced it with a contrived horror scene of Arya sneaking around whites in the library. And it's so bizarre in the behind-the-scenes videos when they praise that moment as they call it the genre shift. And by they, I don't just mean Benioff and Weiss. I mean the cast members who are repeating the pep talk Benioff drilled into them. But they believe it. That it's this brilliant genre shift. It just, so many people were weirded out. I started giggling when it happened. That this is what I said would happen. That it's not even about a giant battle. It's about showing off close-ups of Maisie, close-ups of her face in a non-speaking scene when she's looking scared and emoting and dodging whites. It served no purpose. It slows the episode down, and they seem to think this was some brilliant subversion or something. And you had a horror sequence which made sense, that Sansa and Tyrion are trapped in the crypts and they're trying to sneak around to avoid whites because there's too many of them. It had setup scenes. There's reasons for them to, well, we hid in the crypts. Well, that's a whole other thing but did it make sense to hide in the crypts? But they at least set up, we're hiding in there because we think we'll be safe. And no, they cut that to focus on Arya. But even before that, just thinking of the battle part, in terms of actually go back and watch clips of this or think back to it, I don't think Jaime did anything specific when they were fighting on the walls, other than just it was rinse and repeat. It was constantly a dozen whites are about to gang tackle someone, then they get fought off, then repeat, but without doing like interesting, complex fight moves. They just shrug them off. Because you see, they're interested in the actors emoting as they're about to get killed. So their concept of a battle is, oh no, that character's about to die, but then they're alive, which is consistent. It's what they did in Heart at Home. It's what they did a lot in Battle of the Bastards, that it was just Kit being gang tackled a lot, no strategy. And at very high levels in the White Hunt in Season 7, where, oh no, Tormund is getting swarmed by a dozen whites. This isn't showing off, like, swordsmanship or stunt fight choreography moves. The way I rewatched Battle of Helm's Deep, a lot of people have been watching these side-by-side comparison videos. They're all over YouTube for it. Check those out. They're interesting. Of just Aragorn doesn't get gang tackled by orcs. When he's in trouble, it's when the pace, if you've seen a sword fight, the pace of the fight and the feints and moves with his sword is turning against him. The tide of the fight is turning against him when a bigger Uruk is about to kill him, but then someone stabs the other one from behind. Turning the screws of pacing, the rising tension of, you can see that he's losing ground and taking paces backward, but he's still fighting with a sword. You never just have people gang tackled all the time and then live. That the only person actually showing off fight moves was Arya. But I'm just talking in terms of raw screen time now. Like, who got to have, just Jaime and Brienne were indistinct because they were getting gang tackled. Maybe a few Grey Worm moments, but Arya got a whole new cool weapon, so now she's got needle and a dagger and the staff weapon. Though it kind of made sense that she would need a dragonglass weapon in this context, because needle wouldn't be useful against them. But still, just I'm mentally focusing on how many times did you see just Arya wading through and tearing apart whites and jumping from one rooftop to the next to get away from them, versus, and very clearly, versus obscure quick shots of Jaime getting gang tackled. That the other characters really cease to exist. So just throughout the whole thing, the battle phase and then that library thing was basically replacing a Sansa Tyrion scene. And this is not even touching that Arya gets to kill the Night King at the end, because in terms of raw screen time, that was actually really short. It was right at the end, though it did throw out 7 years worth of plot line about the prince that was promised and Jon Snow and Daenerys. But I'm talking screen time here, that was at the end. It was brief. But to stress, they're not Arya fanboys, they're Maisie Williams fanboys. There is no fictional character anymore, she's just playing a stereotype of herself. Big thought here, that absurdly, in the behind-the-scenes videos, not Benioff and Weiss, the people that they've convinced this is going to work, they're describing an episode that doesn't exist. I mean, physically, not my interpretation of events. That they'll outright be praising themselves for, they directly said this in the Game Revealed thing, that these rants they give about we needed the battle to be well balanced. A good battle needs balanced screen time between every character. And I'm just gaping at this, that is blatantly the opposite of what we just saw. What are you talking about? Tyrion and Sansa fade away from this. Jaime and Brienne fade out from this. Davos, it was all Arya, and even Kit Harington felt like he wasn't in it that much because he's on Dragonback, so it's not like you can zoom in on him talking to people on battlements that much. But who got screen time? And on top of that, not just that a good battle should be a balance between, in any context, should be a good balance between ever. I'm thinking like the Battle of the Blackwater in Season 2, where it was a good balance between multiple sets of characters showing what they're doing during the battle. Everyone gets a moment. Here's what Sandor's doing. Here's what Lancel's doing. Here's what Tyrion's doing. Here's what Stannis is doing. It wasn't that. Beyond that, though, it ruined the whole theme. If you think about if the whole theme of the final battle against the White Walkers of the show is we have to set aside our petty differences to unite against the enemy of life, that this is the whole North uniting. Not just that, the whole world of the living uniting to fight a big battle against life and death. That whole not today crap is something Benioff came up with. What do we say to death? Not today. We all must rise together and put aside our differences. And we didn't see that either, if you think about it, by cutting out all these other character interactions and not managing their time well. By focusing so much on Arya, shouldn't they have shown people who used to be enemies coming together and fighting as one, when that's the whole point? Like the Karstarks, who were antagonizing the Starks for a time, coming together. Or I'm mentally picturing, you needed to have something like Jaime and Jon Snow fighting back to back on the ground, fending off whites. No, I know Jon was in the air, but or Brienne, I guess you could say, well, she originally hated. Brienne originally hated Jaime, so showing them fighting side by side, or Davos and Brienne defending each other when they used to serve other Baratheon brothers. Or oh Christ, I just thought of this. If the whole moral of everyone putting aside their differences to fight side by side and unite against the dead was a big part of this, or supposed to be, why didn't we have a single damn shot of Arya and Jaime fighting back to back on the battlements, defending each other? Arya Stark and Jaime Lannister. Okay, other characters like Jon was in a different part of the battlefield, Brienne and Davos were in a different part of the battlefield, but Jaime and Arya had big scenes of them fighting off the whites as they come over the castle walls. Why not put them on the same section of wall? This writes itself, you idiots. But I don't want to focus even too much on the thematic content there. I'm all over the place here, but what really frightens me are just the basic physical logistics. That yes, there are plot holes from the characters' actions don't make sense without a world where other lords exist who would be reacting to what Cersei does, to what Daenerys does, and blowing up the Great Sept. So that's why you need secondaries like Alice Karstark or the Manderleys or something. But on top of that, just a good fight scene in general, a good battle sequence needs to be balanced between multiple characters, and they really failed at that. Or, on top of that, third point, that this is the climactic battle of the show. This isn't Blackwater. This is the White Walker battle, where everyone should be coming together. And it's really just Arya running around. And no one interacting with former enemies on that scale. So I was just baffled when I saw all of these behind-the-scenes videos months ago of how could these crew members and production team members be confidently saying to the camera, this is going to be a great battle, because a great battle needs to be well balanced between all the characters in terms of screen time, and not just, they would directly say it can't just focus on one or two in particular, when that's specifically what you did. You focused too much on Arya. I was so confused by those moments in behind-the-scenes videos, and, well, with all these deleted scenes they intended as we learn about them, all of these deleted subplots they intended, but could never realistically fit into this. Yeah, I can see now how the cast and crew on set, just take yourself out of it, step back and realize we saw this through a TV screen. Try to put yourself in their position on the ground, looking at the scale of the production, like when you watch that Last Watch documentary, where it looks like something out of Lord of the Rings movies. That you can tell people on the ground must have been convinced this was the next Lord of the Rings, this specific battle. That on the ground there, and having these early filming schedules of all these scenes that were later deleted, based on the original version they were told about, which was an impossible dream that was unrealistic, yeah, I can see how they were convinced this was going to be a well-balanced battle sequence. And not just a bunch of cool Arya moments. But like when they saw the script, they're like, wow, this is so well balanced. It even has Alice Karstark. It even has this commoner, Fergus, in it, standing in for all the commoners. But that is their fault. It's not just, shucks, this got deleted. Who deleted it? Who deleted it? Why was it deleted? Because this is, just when you add up the physical minutes of screen time it would have taken to film all of this, it was impossible. Or to edit it together with good pacing. They could never fit coherently into a whole, well-paced episode, and all these subplots ended up deleted on the cutting room floor. I look at this pyramid chart I made here. That at the bottom you've got the commoners and the common people, the farmers who aren't major lords or anything, not even like a Brienne or Tormund scale character. And then above that you have major recurring lords like Lord Royce or Lord Howland Reed or Alice Karstark. Then above that you've got prominent recurring starring cast like Brienne, Tormund, Grey Worm, Davos. And above that you've got the starring cast of 7 people, this whole pyramid from your Jaime scale core 7 down through Alice Karstark, and below her the commoners and small folk. And on the top of that pyramid, let's put Arya, because she's in a category unto herself. As they conceptualize this battle, this is going to be like a 3-hour movie or something in their heads, genuinely intending to show the entire pyramid of society fighting this huge battle. Thematically, this is the whole world is doing this down to the level of the commoners and showing the experience of it, the common man and the lords. And we could already tell just from watching it that even main characters like Jane, from watching the final version, there is no pyramid of all of society. That even main characters, core 7, like Jaime and Tyrion, were shorted and didn't do that much. And then we found out from the deleted script scene reports that no, this was supposed to be an even bigger scale, going down the pyramid broadly to Alice and Fergus and the commoners. And now with this final clarification here of all the deleted scenes, it turns out they had this insane scale in mind of going down to the bottom rungs of the pyramid to Fergus. And just thinking of that they're trying to even go down below the major lords, down to even, there was going to be a subplot for a everyman commoner character. Not even considering Alice. Below that, we were going to go down to level this Fergus guy. If you haven't seen it, another relevant video I made from behind the scenes clips, and it's short, it's like 15 minutes, I'll link directly below, and at the end of this on, quote, why Arya is focused on during the Battle of King's Landing in episode 5. How bizarrely, and they just openly say this in the inside the episode for episode 5, Benioff and Weiss started by saying how important it was to focus on the commoners. We really needed to show the commoners, the people the lords have been ignoring, and how they're the ones who suffer the most from this attack by the dragon. So it's really important to show the destruction of King's Landing from their point of view, down at the ground level. Only to then, holy Christ, then 3 minutes later in the same video explain, but we're not really invested in peasant characters we've never introduced before, so we decided to show off Arya again as racing through the burning city, because the audience is emotionally invested in her. Yeah, but please watch that. I have a clip of that. It's pretty short. It's just another case of showing off Maisie, and really, more so than that, it is the exact same thing that happened to this Fergus character. He was meant to be this everyman character, showing how the commoners and peasants are doing. And they spent months building a fully realized King's Landing street set, because the idea was to show off the suffering of the common people in the streets, but then the scene became about Arya. All of that effort went into that because the original intention was to show off the plight of the commoners, when there was no time management to do that, that you need to plan out that scale. That in both of these cases, these are directly related, that Fergus being cut from the Winterfell battle, the commoners not really being focused on during the fall of King's Landing. In both cases, the ultimate decision was, we don't care about these people and didn't budget our time well enough to build up audience investment in them. Let's just show off Arya again. And they truly did not recognize the contradiction. That if this was that important to them, it's full of what people are saying, self-congratulation and back-patting, that they'll be complimenting. We really want to show the plight of the commoners in the Battle of the Long Nights. We made this Fergus character, but then we cut him for time to give more to Arya. It's just, they don't realize that's embarrassing. And just the scale of this was beyond absurd. Like when you see that Fire Festival documentary with the Billy McFarland guy, that when you saw what they ended up with, how it turned out, it's just some scattered tents on a beach somewhere, we had a good laugh. But it's really horrifying when you see the documentary of clips of people months before the festival happened, that when they're hyped up about how big this festival will be and how unrealistic it is, that they really thought they could build a festival the size of Coachella or something on an isolated Caribbean island, which is absurd in terms of simple logistics. In the scene where they go, we didn't have enough porta potties to physically fit on the first small island we were using, that they really thought this was going to be huge. That it turned out to be this tiny nothing at the end. You really thought this was going to be like the next Super Bowl or Disneyland, or how delusional they were in thinking how big they hoped this would be. And it really never occurred to them, we physically can't fit all of this stuff there or get it there in time. Because these aren't just deleted scenes here and there. That's the big point. They're deleted story arcs. When you have a story arc of even just 2 or 3 scenes, that drastically increases the complexity and logistical pressure on the filming unit. Because if you have a beginning, middle, and end, but can't film one of those 3 things, the other 2 become unusable. You can't just go with 2 out of 3. And we saw this in prior seasons, heavily since season 5, the relic scenes everywhere from abandoned storylines. And I mean this purely on a filming level, not a writing level. The physical reality of the logistics of production, pervasively refusing to listen to people telling them, we're running overtime, we won't be able to film the payoff scenes to certain story arcs, which will now have to be entirely scrapped or result in bizarre relic scenes that don't fit with the rest of the episode. That it was a great risk to squeeze it in, because if an actor missed a day or something due to a scheduling conflict, there's no makeup days left. We saw that with Battle of the Bastards when they ran overtime. It was film it then or never. So with this Fergus guy, you can see how this happened, that he couldn't film his death scene. So his other 2 setup scenes that we're getting in this box set of him at the soup line and then him with Davos, they couldn't use those because they didn't budget their time well enough to film his death scene. The other scenes were unusable. That's squarely the fault of the showrunners for bad planning. And we go, oh no, they could have anticipated running overtime. It was anticipated. These aren't the only 2 people filming this. In fact, they were barely there, they said. There was a small army of production unit people, all of the department heads, dozens of people telling them, warning them. It's their job to warn them when they're running overtime, and they willfully ignored them. And guess how that turned out? Now Benioff and Weiss got kicked off the next Star Wars films, and long-suffering director Miguel Sapochnik of the Long Night battle scene is now co-showrunner on the new Targaryen prequel, The Poetic Justice. Just, these deleted scenes from Season 8 aren't merely fun little alternate versions of scenes or unused ideas, like in a normal TV show. They're the remnants of entire subplots that had to be abandoned due to basic poor planning. The true scale of how much they seriously thought they could cram into this was genuinely horrifying. Well, please check out the 3 videos I mentioned through this on first, because it's shortest, start with the one that's clips of them talking about how we built up this entire King's Landing set to show off the suffering of the commoners, but then 2 minutes later go, but who cares about the commoners? This is about Arya. Wait, what? And then move on to it's a montage of clips, not just me yelling, but behind-the-scenes stuff from the Last Watch documentary about the filming of the Long Night episode and just how much they were running overtime, what a production nightmare it was, that they didn't know what they were doing. And if you have time, if you watch through the first 2, one of my bigger videos, the one on the behind-the-scenes problems with the Battle of the Bastards, also by Miguel Sapochnik, who he's a hero for the stuff he had to put up with, that this was squarely the fault of the showrunners telling him to do the impossible, and he had to suffer through that. And he's one of the few directors who was willing to talk about what happened working with them. So, but the Battle of Bastards behind-the-scenes video is like 2 hours long. Watch the shorter first 2 ones if you want to move on to the other one later. But the background stuff of this isn't even a matter of story. It's how did you morons think you could physically film all of this in a limited time with complex multi-scene story arcs where if you lose one scene, you lose the whole thing, and fit it in within the time limit and edit together a coherent episode. How did you even think you could film all of this, much less edit together with good pacing? Yikes. Well, that wraps it up for the Season 8 deleted scenes. We got some other details about stuff that will be included in the Season 8 Blu-ray set. I just want to talk about the deleted scenes here. Like, I had another video already on the histories and more animated stuff we're getting. We're going to have other behind-the-scenes videos that aren't deleted scenes, but more documentary stuff. I'll review those when it comes out, and I'll go down the list of what we're getting. But the other interesting thing I'm going to make a separate video on is that the Season 8 Blu-ray set will surprisingly include deleted scenes from Season 7 that have never been released before, including what appears to be a big scene of Samwell and Gilly going through books about the prophecy of the prince that was promised. We have a promo shot of that was released in Season 7. So did they cut that out of Season 7 because it was truly mid-season 7 is around when they decided that Arya would be the one to kill the Night King instead, and that they were throwing out the Prince that was promised stuff? And is the reason that for some reason Season 7 was the first year that didn't have deleted scenes like that? It was just, why aren't there any deleted scenes this year? Did they put them on hold because they were too embarrassing, because so many story arcs were abandoned mid-run, that to reveal there was actually a lot of setup scenes for the prince that was promised, and they cut out the ones they could cut out without making the season more unintelligible? The mind boggles, but I'm devoting a whole other video to that of, wait a minute, why are we getting these Season 7 deleted scenes now? Were you trying to hide them? But I'm going to talk about that in the direct sequel video to this one.